there will be, however, there will be one item to be discussed tonight, and that is the proposed homeless shelter for 130 men to be located at 661 Broadway. This shelter is proposed to go up in fall 2023. I know there is a growing concerns over this, and tonight we're here to discuss it. However, there is rules for this meeting, so let me go over the rules. Tonight, the Department of Social Services, along with the service provider of African American Planning Commission, will be presenting. They will go first and they will present their idea of what this project is about and how they will structure it and how will it affect our neighborhood. Once they are finished, then we will go into a Q&A session. Now, the Q&A session, there has to be order. Now, what will happen is that the public, the community, and our elected officials will get to speak. However, these are the rules. You will get to ask one question and stay under 1 minute. So with that said, let me do some housekeeping tonight. Let me check with our community, our members of this committee. Steve Food, are you here?
Hi, Omar, it's Kira, the district manager. I've given people permission to unmute themselves, hoping that nobody speaks out of line while you're especially doing attendance. So committee members are able now to unmute themselves.
Thank you.
Robert Kaplan.
I'm here.
Sebastian. Sebastian, that's all right. Steve, are you here yet? No. Okay. Are there representatives from the Department of Homeless, from Department of Social Services here as yet?
Paul Hargrove is here from Department of Homeless Services, Program Administrator.
All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from Department of Social Services? African American Planning Commission?
Good evening. My name is Matthew Okabi. I'm the CEO of African American Planning Commission.
Right. Okay. Welcome. I was told that the Deputy Commissioner for DSS will be here to present. Ms. Drinkwater.
She is having problems getting in. She's I don't know why she cannot get in. She's tried several times.
Okay, she can try again. We were having capacity issues, but she can try again now and she should be able to get in.
Okay, so I will send her a text.
In the meantime, everybody sit tight. We're gonna get to it. It is the only action item. It is the only thing that's on the agenda. I know there was something that the agenda was sent out. However, we canceled that presentation, so we will only be focused on this topic tonight.
Yep.
Matthew?
Yes, sir.
Can you let me know when Ms. Drinkwater is here?
Yes, I just sent her a message. I'm hoping she will try to get in again.
Yeah, I know there's a petition that was started on change.org. Hi, Kim, how are you? Kim Halley, I know you're here.
Yeah, I had trouble getting in because of the capacity, so
right, we already fixed that, so we're good now.
Yep, I'm here. Just want to let you know.
So as I was saying, there was a petition that was started that garnered over 500 signature opposition against this project. So, you know, rest assured that the community board is here and we're here to work with you in whatever capacity that we can. I see some hands are going up. Please lower your hand, and when they're finished, then you will get to ask your question. When the presenters are finished, you will get to ask your question.
And there are several people who are unmuted. They should mute themselves until you call upon them, because there could be inadvertent noise in their background.
Okay. So everyone that you're not participating in this discussion until when you're finished, please mute yourself, and then you will, okay. There we go.
Omar, Erin Drinkwater is coming in now. She was in the waiting room.
Perhaps we can mute everyone and then unmute the individuals that will be speaking. I think that might be an effective way to alleviate the.
Perhaps we can figure out somebody who could.
All right. Ms. Drinkwater, are you here? So Kira, can we unmute Ms. Drinkwater? Hello, Ms. Drinkwater, good evening.
She should be unmuted.
Ah, there we go. Thank you so much, and apologies for the difficulty getting into the meeting.
All right, good evening and welcome to the Community Board 8 Health and Hospital Committee. I already went over the ground rules, which I explained that you will be presenting tonight on 6661 Broadway, a homeless shelter for 130 men. And after you are finished presenting, then we're going to go into a Q&A where everyone will only have 1 minute and one person only. I do want to welcome everyone, including our elected officials. And Ms. Drinkwater, I am going to turn the floor over to you right now.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Drinkwater. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs with the Department of Social Services. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Paul Hargrove, and also by our provider, who will be able to be present during the Q&A to answer questions about the program that they will be operating at this location. Before we dive into the specifics of the project at 6661 Broadway, I wanted to provide a little bit of an overview of how we got here and some of the work that we've been doing over the course of this administration in terms of addressing homelessness. We all know that homelessness in New York City and across the country is very real and the result of policy decisions made over many decades. In New York City and Albany and Washington, decisions that have been made have very real impacts on most vulnerable New Yorkers. During 1994 to 2014, we saw an incredibly dramatic increase in homelessness of 115%. And during the years of 2011 and 2014, we saw a 40% increase to more than 51,000 in just 3 years. In 2011, there was a decision made by the state to end what was called the Advantage Program, which was a rental assistance program that assisted New Yorkers in payment of their rent. Without that program, we saw the homeless population skyrocket. Under this administration, since 2014, we have made real efforts in terms of addressing a haphazard system that has grown up over many decades. We've put structure into the place of an area where there was little structure. We've brought providers under contract, but we've really started our work and focused our work on 4 pillars. The first one is prevention. We recognize that preventing homelessness is critically important, but requires different types of investments for different type of experiences and how people arrive at our shelter doors. The first is that we invested over $162 million in creating the nation's first ever Right to Counsel program. That program provides legal assistance and counsel for individuals in housing court. And prior to the pandemic, we saw a 40% reduction in evictions across New York City, while nationwide evictions were going up. Being able to provide somebody with legal counsel was critical in terms of keeping people in their home. But we didn't just do that. We also expanded what is called Homebase. Homebase are community-based organizations working across the 5 boroughs to provide assistance to individuals, again, to help keep them in their home. This can mean paying rental assistance or paying rent arrears and utility arrears, determining whether or not somebody might be eligible for benefits such as cash assistance, food stamps, working with tenants and landlords if there are issues between those two parties, offering mediation services, and really determining how we can, again, make sure that we're keeping New Yorkers in our home. When this administration started, there were 14 offices and there are now 26. We've more than doubled the amount of rental arrears paid to keep New Yorkers in their home. And through the rebuilding of the rental assistance programs this administration has undertaken over the last almost 8 years, we've helped more than 175,000 New Yorkers. I want to say that number again, 175,000 New Yorkers avoid entry into shelter or move out of shelter. The vast majority of those individuals, of that 175,000 number, are individuals moving out of shelter. We've also, as I mentioned, are working to transform the shelter system. This includes the mayor's Turning the Tide plan of getting out of stopgap locations that we've used to meet the legal requirement of right to shelter. New York City is one of the few jurisdictions that has a right to shelter obligation, which means on any given night, the Department of Homeless Services is legally obligated to provide shelter to New Yorkers who are eligible. We have gotten out of commercial hotels. We have gotten out of cluster locations that have taken units off of the affordable housing market and have turned those over to nonprofit ownership and returned them to the affordable housing stock. We've also made the commitment to opening 90 new shelters that are high quality with providers such as the African American Planning Commission, who's here with us tonight, who will be the provider at this location. Those 90 new shelters take into account the trend that we see in our census over time to serve adult family populations, families with children populations, single adult women, and single adult men. We've also opened the first ever LGBT shelter and have really worked to identify the best shelter models to serve individuals who are experiencing homelessness to get them back on their feet. We've announced 89 shelters. We have 46 of them open and operating, and the gap between those shelters announced and the ones that are open and operating has to do with the high quality shelter and the development necessary to bring those projects online. Which gets me to our program and the shelter today that we're here to discuss at 661 Broadway. This will be a ground up development. This will be a purpose-built site. What that means is instead of shoehorning a program into an existing building, we are able to design the building for the purpose of shelter to meet the needs of the client and community. This is a unique part of the mayor's plan of those 90 shelters, bringing on purpose-built sites. This site will be owned and operated by our nonprofit provider. And it in preliminary drawings, the building will be 5 stories tall. We will have recreational and kitchen space, eating space, social services offices, as well as dorms. Our single shelter capacity is laid out in what's called a congregate style facility, which means dorm style layouts. The dorms will sleep anywhere from 6 individuals and have shared bathrooms and recreation space on each floor, in addition to the recreation space on the first floor. In addition, I think I mentioned this, there will be outside recreation space. And importantly, the building will be ADA accessible and designed to accommodate individuals with mobility, hearing, and visual impairments. This is particularly important given a federal lawsuit that the city settled a couple of years ago, requiring that the city maintain enough capacity for individuals with accessibility needs. We're partnering, as I mentioned, with the African American Planning Commission. This is a nonprofit who has been doing this work for many decades. They have shelters in Brooklyn, a couple of in Manhattan and Queens, and this will be the first location in the Bronx. Part of their program, and I'll let them talk about it later, is that they will have social services staff on site. They will also have security staff on site 24/7. But before I turn it over to our nonprofit provider, I'd like to just talk a minute about how individuals experiencing homelessness place, because I think the process is really important and will provide some context to the types of individuals that will be served at this location. So the Department of Homeless Services has a single point of intake for our single adult system. Men enter at 30th Street in Manhattan, and women have two locations, one in the Bronx and one in Brooklyn. So the men who will ultimately be assigned to this program shelter will come into intake at 30th Street. We'll work with that individual to learn about why are they in need of shelter? What is it that brings them to the Department of Homeless Services requiring the support and service and shelter providers? Once we get a little bit of information about that individual, we're able to first try again to prevent them from coming into shelter. We want to work to divert individuals and look at what resources are available other than shelter. Are we able to pay utility arrears? Are we able to pay rent arrears? Can we connect them to legal services because they were threatened with eviction, but actually have no reason to leave, and having an attorney support them can preserve that tenancy. We might also be able to connect them with family members who might be able to take them inside. Our first goal is to divert people from shelter, but that's not always possible, and we recognize that. They are then assigned to what's called an assessment shelter. At the assessment shelter, the agency works over a matter of weeks to, again, learn more about the individual. We conduct a biopsychosocial, so we are determining if there are healthcare needs, if there are mental health care needs. Again, the point of this is to be able to then assign the individual to the program shelter that's best suited to meet their needs, right? Every individual comes with a constellation of service needs that they have, and we want to make sure that we're doing our best to place them. DHS places all clients in accordance with state and local law. We do not discriminate against individuals who have involvement with the criminal legal system. I know that a question that I'm sure will come up tonight is about sex offenders. Again, we place all clients in accordance with state and local law. Individuals who are required to register on the sex offender registry site, we take that into consideration along, again, with the host of complexities that a client might come to us. There are also clients who are required to not only register as a sex offender, but are required to have residency restrictions. And so when I say that we follow the law in terms of where individuals are able to be placed, if an individual has a residency restriction, it means that they can't be placed within 1,000 feet of a school, and DHS follows the law in that account. Once an individual is at the assessment shelter, they are then transferred to a program shelter. The shelter that is proposed and we're moving forward with at 661 Broadway is a general population shelter. In addition to general population shelters, we have shelters that are designed to serve people with severe substance use or mental health diagnoses. This is not that shelter. We have shelters, as I mentioned, we have an LGBTQI shelter, we have senior shelters, we have employment shelters. This is a general population shelter. So there are many reasons why an individual experiencing homelessness would come to be placed at this location. And then they work with our provider in terms of their permanency plan. And that permanency plan really does start at the intake, but it's in the program shelter that they get that service to ultimately transition back to permanent housing through family reunification, rental assistance, making their own arrangements, getting connected to employment or different employment. There are any number of ways that individuals exit the shelter system. All of DHS's shelters have a 10 p.m. curfew. All residents are required to be inside by 10 p.m. or else they lose their bed. If a client does lose their bed, it doesn't mean that they stay out in the community all night. What that means is that DHS works with that client on site immediately that evening to transfer them to another location. And the reason for that is because we're under a legal obligation to provide shelter for those who are eligible every single night. So what happens is, as a client comes in after curfew, we work to transfer them to a location. It is in the interest of the client to be inside prior to curfew to avoid that traumatic experience of being uprooted from that location and transferred somewhere else, late at night. In addition to the curfew, under this administration, we made a significant policy change that clients are permitted to remain in shelter during the day. Under prior administrations, that was not the case. Clients were not permitted to stay inside the shelter. Our clients under our administration and the policy change are permitted to stay in the shelter throughout the day. We believe this is an opportunity to connect to the on-site social services that will be on site, as well as to work with the provider if there are instances where they're connected to off-site social services and programming as well. I know that we're going to get into a lot of questions. I'd like to just turn it over to the provider very quickly to say a couple of words, and then certainly turn it over to the chair for Q&A. Thank you so much.
Matthew?
Good
Hi,
evening,
Matthew.
everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Did she hear us? No, she's asked me to meet. I would like to speak.
Matthew, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Okabi. I am the CEO of African American Planning Commission. We are a nonprofit organization, Brooklyn-based. We were founded in 1996, and we've been providing services to New Yorkers ever since. We currently operate 2 domestic violence shelters, one in Brooklyn and one in Queens, in the Bronx. We are one of 3 domestic violence shelters in New York City that also service male heads of households. Not many shelters do that. In addition to our domestic violence shelters, we also currently operate a 125-unit supportive and affordable housing program in Brooklyn. We are in the process of developing another affordable housing project, 223 apartments. We are currently working with DHS. We operate 9 homeless shelters. We service over 1,000 men, single men and women, adult men and women. And we're currently working on this project as previously mentioned. We are primarily a social service organization. We intend to do what we currently do at other shelters, which is to provide a host of services. Some of the services that we shall be provided include the following: housing placements. That means that we will have social workers, case managers who will be working with our clients to place them in affordable housing within New York, outside New York, with private landlords, private developers. We'll be working with everybody. Social service programming also include job placement assistance. Not everyone who comes into shelter is just unemployed. We have low-income working individuals. So we'll be working with those individuals to make sure that they maintain their employment status. We have recreational services within the facility. We will be developing linkage agreements with a host of other community-based organizations, whether it's with health care service providers, whether it's with other nonprofit service providers, whether it's substance abuse providers, things of that nature. We will also be working with anyone who needs mental health services. Those who are stressed, it could be due to COVID, unemployment, things of that nature. We will be working with all our clients to make sure that they maintain their income, whether we have clients who are on public assistance, and make sure they do not lose those benefits. In terms of the building itself, one of the biggest concerns I'm sure will come up is that of security. Because it's a brand new building, or will be a brand new building, we intend to have security cameras throughout the building, inside the building and outside the exterior of the building, so we can monitor the vicinity of the building. We intend to work with the local police department the same way we do with other communities. We work with the local police department so that they know of our presence. If we need assistance, they're there for us, and we can work, together. The other thing that we also do is we do perimeter checks. On every shift, we have 3 shifts, 8 to 4, 4 to 12, and 12 to 8. On each shift, staff walk around the vicinity to make sure that there's no loitering in the neighborhood. In addition to that, we also have what we call the good neighborhood policy, or good neighbor policy, whereby we meet with the residents when they come into the building for the first time, and we have ongoing monthly meetings to make sure that we notify the tenants, or the clients rather, that there are certain things, behaviors that they have to maintain and adhere to, so that they do not get in the way of people who live in the neighborhood. We work very closely with elected officials. We work closely with community boards. If there are issues or concerns, we have a point person, or we will assign a point person to the shelter that can be contacted, and so that we can address any issues or concerns that immediately come to our attention as quickly as possible. And that's a snapshot of the service we shall be providing. We will be contracting with a security guard company, so we will have on-site security 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in addition to that, we will have a director of the shelter, an assistant director of the shelter. We will have case managers, social workers, licensed social workers, and just a gamut of other staff, recreation, employment, substance abuse, mental health counselors, and just to name a few. And I'd like to turn the mic over back to the chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for presenting tonight. We are now down to our Q&A session. And again, let me reemphasize the rules. 1 minute per person. If you ask a question, you will not be permitted to ask a second question. And please mute yourselves. I would like to ask the first question. I think this goes to Ms. Drinkwater. I want to know, what is the current CB8 homeless rate? Do you have those figures with you?
Sorry, you broke up a bit. I didn't catch.
The current amount of people that are homeless that within CB8.
That are from CB8?
Yes.
Sure. So let me just start with the overall status. So Monday evening, 45,900 individuals were in the DHS shelter system. Mm-hmm. Of those, 16,516 were single adults, and 12,417 were single adult men. From Bronx 8, we have approximately 250 individuals whose last known address is from this community board. But what's important to note is that we don't have last known address.
Let me ask you something. I didn't hear you. 200 and?
Approximately 250.
Okay.
And so if I could just continue, we don't have last known addresses for all of our clients. And so that's one point. The other point is it's not a 1-for-1 of individuals from Community Board 8 and those being sheltered within Community Board 8. This is for a host and a variety of reasons, including ensuring that there is appropriate accessibility in the shelter that's available. There might not be a vacant bed in a particular location for somebody who requires a unit or bed because they have mobility issues. There are individuals who are survivors of domestic and intimate partner violence who are able to be housed in the locations from which they came from into the shelter. So there's a host of reasons of why a sort of one-to-one comparison is a bit misdirected, but approximately 250 individuals.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that 130 single men, they're not all from CBA, right? No?
So when we place individuals, we do try to place people so first of all, the 130 individuals, we don't know who they are. This location is not going to open until 2023. But what I can talk about is our process generally. We do try to locate people in a shelter that's going to best suit that individual's needs. Now, geography can play a role in that. Being housed close to the anchors of support in their lives, whether that be family, friends, faith communities, work, employment, or individuals might want a fresh start in a different area. Again, it's not just the geography that's taken into account when placing a client. We want to make sure that accessibility needs are met, that if there's commuting to employment, that's required and met. That the social services on site are going to meet the needs of that client. There's a whole constellation of metrics that are used when placing individuals, but we do make that attempt to place individuals near the community.
All right, thank you so much. So now we're going to open up for questions. I see some.
Omar, we have questions. We have comments from the elected officials that we agreed we're going to go before the public.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
We're going to go now to the elected officials. Assemblyman Deniowitz, I will have you go first, and then Councilman Deniowitz after. Assemblyman Deniowitz. Yeah, I think you're on.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. You weren't letting me do that before.
Okay.
Good evening, all. Despite my long-time work to improve housing and prevent homelessness, I am unable to support this proposal. In fact, I strongly oppose it. It was poorly thought out, and I believe it will cause many problems in our neighborhood, which consists of hardworking people who in many cases have invested everything they have into their homes or apartments. Yesterday, the councilman and I spoke with Deputy Commissioner Erin Drinkwater, who's here tonight, about concerns that we have and that have been raised by many people here. So I just want to give you some facts. Fact. When a shelter was first proposed for Broadway and 237th, we were told by the administration at the time that our community board was not doing its fair share to house people who became homeless from Community Board 8. Given the fact that there are probably at least 200 people residing in the family shelter, which by the way, I think has been a big success, surely we're doing our share in terms of numbers to address homelessness in the city. But now the administration has moved the goalpost instead by saying, but we don't have our share of single men in Community Board 8 shelters. Fact, 2 of the largest shelters in my district, both for single men, have had negative impacts on the community. The men's shelter at 4380 Bronx Boulevard was where the director, Anna Chalet, was viciously stalked, sexually assaulted, and murdered outside the shelter by a former resident with a violent criminal history, including a conviction for attempted murder. It was only after that tragedy that the city heeded our call to provide security there. The men's shelter at 3600 Jerome Avenue, up toward the end of the L, has been a constant source of countless complaints by neighborhood residents and merchants. Fact, at the time of the murder at the Bronx Boulevard shelter, as many as 40% of the residents were convicted sex offenders, according to information we were given at the time. The community was never informed of the composition of the population when the city came in and presented their plans for that shelter. Fact, according to the administration, there can be no guarantees that this shelter wouldn't have a similar population. While I absolutely understand that unhoused people who are served by DHS are human beings who deserve to be treated with dignity and morality, the administration absolutely must understand that many of the fears and worries that's been expressed by local residents are legitimate and must be taken seriously by the bureaucrats making decisions about what happens to our community. Fact, according to the administration, there can be no guarantee that the various services needed by the residents will be available 24/7 or be available on site. Fact, according to the administration, there will be 8 to 10 men in each room, which can include men with mental health issues, men who are substance users, and yes, possibly sex offenders. I certainly care deeply about the people with mental health and substance abuse issues, but it would be misleading to say that such a grouping of 8 to 10 men in a room would be problem-free. Housing 8 to 10 men, some of whom have had these serious issues together in one room, is undignified anywhere, let alone in a facility that does not have all the social services and substance abuse and mental health services on site. Those who support building a homeless shelter for 130 men at 6661 Broadway will say that this is about being compassionate. I believe this plan is the opposite of compassionate. Fact, according to the administration, the cost of running the shelter is $137.74 per day per resident. Do the math, multiply by 365, multiply by 130. That means that the cost of running this shelter is $6.5 million a year. And that probably doesn't take into account other expenses, Medicaid, and so on. The CEO of AACPI receives an annual salary of well in excess of $500,000 a year. For an organization dedicated to helping the less fortunate, he's most fortunate. I believe no one in the entire legislature has been more successful in the past 2 years in helping to prevent homelessness than I have been. Why do I say that? 2 of the planks in the historic 2019 omnibus bill known as the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act were based on my bills. The 2020 Tenant Safe Harbor Act that I authored in response to the COVID-19 pandemic was the main, and was the main assembly sponsor of, was a reason why thousands of evictions were prevented. And I authored and was the main assembly sponsor of the eviction and foreclosure moratorium and 2 extensions that have been in effect for all of this year through January 15th of next year. There is no question that this legislation, which I wrote, prevented evictions of thousands, probably tens of thousands of people, and have prevented huge numbers of people from becoming homelessness. It wasn't the city administration or the DHS that did this. It was me and my colleagues in the state legislature representing you. We also passed the state budget this year that provided nearly $3 billion for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program to help keep people at home, and $2.1 billion for the Excluded Workers Program. We did our job. Proposals for homeless shelters, and I'm almost done, are always controversial. We know that. It's important that we work together as one neighborhood, one community to address this. I find it disheartening that a couple of the opponents, and I mean just a few, opponents of this shelter have selfishly said that the shelter should be built in someone else's neighborhood. Not very neighborly. I have no patience for that kind of divisiveness. I have several neighborhoods in my district, and I fight like crazy for every single one of them. One person even said, and I'm going to quote, I'm not going to say who it is, obviously, if it must be in Riverdale, let's spread the wealth to our assemblymen and councilmen and your area of South Riverdale. That kind of rhetoric not only hurts our ability to effectively address this issue, but I just want to let that very ill-informed person know that while I live in the southern part of Riverdale, the councilman lives in northern Riverdale. We cannot allow administration divide and conquer tactics to work. We must make sure that our concerns about this plan remain front and center in the conversation. I want to conclude by saying that it's my belief, and probably that of most people on the call here, that the entire shelter system has been a miserable failure. The administration didn't create this homelessness crisis. It was around long before this mayor, but I failed to see significant improvements. And now our community is being asked to shoulder an additional burden because of this failure. This very expensive shelter should not be built, and I stand with my neighbors and oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Drinkwater, would you like to respond or no?
Sure, I appreciate the Assembly member taking the time yesterday to connect and would just like to respond to a couple of points that were raised. In regards to not seeing any progress, let me start there. When this administration took office, the homeless census was at approximately 60,000 individuals. A couple of moments ago, I reported that on Monday night, 45,000 people slept in DHS shelter. If a reduction of 15,000 persons is not progress, I think we have two different definitions of progress. The families with children census is lower than it was in 2012, but we are seeing changes in the shelter population. We are seeing increases in our single adult census, and that has to do with a number of factors. It has to do with deinstitutionalization without requisite investment in community support. It has to do with decarceration, again, without requisite discharge planning. We've been pushing for a bill in the state legislature for multiple years now that would require the State Department of Corrections to provide appropriate discharge planning so that way individuals who are discharged from upstate prisons are not discharged to our doorstep. We've also supported legislation to increase the state FEPS rental level. This was passed by both houses, and we're hopeful that the governor would sign this, and we welcome the Assembly member support on that piece of legislation. We have made progress, but there's progress to go. Our housing stock is incongruent with the needs of New Yorkers. This mayor put together the most significant affordable housing plan to preserve and bring on additional affordable housing, but that pipeline takes time to develop. Similarly, this mayor made the single largest municipal investment in supportive housing, but that supportive housing pipeline takes time to develop. Each and every night, we have individuals showing up on our door, and we have a legal obligation and a moral obligation to provide them shelter. Through these conversations, what we're able to do is we're able to hear the real concerns of the community and create ways to communicate directly with our provider so we can respond to those concerns and make adjustments. As the Assembly member noted, after the tragic murder at Anna's place, there were adjustments made to the security protocol. Security already existed at that shelter, but it was enhanced after the fact. We do listen to our community members and we work to be good neighbors, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Daniels?
All right, I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, and thanks for having me, allowing me to say a few words. I want everyone here to know that, in case you didn't hear before, Assemblymember Dinowitz and I did meet with Deputy Commissioner Drinkwater, and that we have experience with shelters in my council district. So what I'm about to say isn't a ton of speculation. There's not a ton of speculation in what I want to share. And I just first want to make clear my position, and that's that I oppose this current shelter plan. Providing services to our unsheltered New Yorkers and preventing homelessness in the first place, that's been a large part of my work and advocacy at City Hall since April when I was sworn in. I've worked to keep people housed and make it easier to find a home. So within my short time in the council, I'm very proud to have sponsored legislation that expands the right to counsel, providing legal assistance for those facing eviction, helping to keep people in their homes. I sponsored legislation to increase the value of rental vouchers and legislation which makes it easier for runaway homeless youth and those in the foster system to get those vouchers. This helps keep people housed and out of our shelter system. I sponsored legislation to provide safety training for guards in the shelter system. And I'm working to provide more services for our veterans so they can qualify for services and housing vouchers, thus keeping even more New Yorkers in their homes. I've supported multiple affordable housing projects in the district, including those which have set aside units for formerly homeless tenants to keep people housed and out of the shelter system. Through my discretionary funding, I funded organizations that provide support for those who are currently unsheltered and for those who are under the threat of losing their homes. This helps keep people in their homes. I've funded organizations that provide employment to homeless individuals, which includes counselors and training. Over $500,000 to eviction prevention services, mental health services, services to help tenants, homeowners, outreach and workshops to assist tenants. It's not to mention individual services my office provides. And I say all this to make clear that keeping people in their homes and out of the shelters, supporting our homeless population is of the utmost importance to me, that ensuring that our most vulnerable actually get the support that they need. And that's something that I've worked to do. So when I learned that a plan was in place and a contract was given to AAPCI, it came suddenly and without adequate information. And as an elected official, as a community board, we were told that this would happen rather than consulted with. And I hear the deputy commissioner keeps using the word conversations, but this is more like a plan that's already put forth. This is seems like a presentation. Everyone in New York City has the right to shelter, but it is only right that the community in which that shelter is set to be properly consulted before big decisions like this are made. After all, it's not only the unhoused that are being affected, but the very people who have chosen a neighborhood, a community who deserve to be heard. So when I heard of the plan, I and the assembly member, we reached out to the deputy commissioner. We set up a meeting as soon as possible. To be as straightforward, I'm troubled by the plan. Shelters are more than just a physical space, a physical place to stay for unsheltered people. They need to be an avenue to receive services and help that people need to transition into permanent housing. Transitions that shouldn't take a year, which is what the information that was provided to us. The proposed plan includes dorm-style rooms with 8 to 10 people per room, the absence of 24-hour services and counseling, and in my view, an inadequate number of security guards. This is, again, according to the information we received. And it's really astounding to me that the city talks about compassion for the homeless while cramming them into these rooms, all while restricting access to the very services that will both help our homeless and our current residents. And so we were told there is a lack of 24-hour counseling, mental health support, but we were told tonight that if someone comes in after curfew, they get the services. So there's a lot of questions that are not answered.
So Councilmember,
What did
perhaps it
me-
would be helpful. Oh, sorry, I thought you were finished.
Yeah, no, yeah. And hopefully you can address some of these tonight, because I don't believe the plans address the needs of the people currently living there, nor will it address the issues that contribute to people ending up in the shelter system in the first place. And the DHS and the administration tries to paint a rosy picture of shelters, but we know there are issues with single men shelters. We've had cases in our district where homeless services have actually offered shelter to someone living on the street, and that homeless person refuses it because they prefer their current situation on the street rather than going into that shelter. I mean, that should tell you something. This is a reality that any DHS outreach team member can tell you, that many people living without homes are fearful of the violence and having their belongings stolen, things that occur in our shelter system too often, that they choose to be on the street. And while there's understaffed security team, there does not appear to be robust on-site services. Social workers, therapists, counselors, again, are not readily available. This is according to our conversation, so maybe that's changed, but
So
they're
no,
not there. Well, this is according to our conversation. So I'll just say a few more words, and then I'm sure you'll have something to disagree with here. But what I'm saying, again, with all due respect, is based on our conversations and my experience with others, with the community and the work I've done. So again, this is a question we asked you. You said there will not be 24/7 social services to meet the needs, and we know that these homeless individuals need help. And if they're having a crisis in the middle of the night, the only one there to greet them will be a security guard. And I don't know when. And that is what you told me. So the needs of the unhoused individuals are not being met, and in my view, will not be met. And this is not good for anyone, because what does it mean when people who admittedly they have real needs, they don't have those needs met? When those needs met, what does that mean for them? And what does that mean for the community in which they reside? And I just want to say one other thing that is troubling to me. And I'm really interested to hear from the nonprofit. The story you tell, your website, the story you tell tonight, it tells the story of the work you do and you're going to do, but for over $4,000 per person per month, or $6.5 million a year for the residents, again, this is something I asked, didn't get a real answer. I don't see the financial incentive. Well, they have every financial incentive to keep residents in the shelter. I really don't see the incentive, the financial incentive they have to move people to permanent housing and provide the services. It's another piece of the plan that's hidden, is the incentive AAPCI has to reduce the homeless population, reduce the number of people in the shelter. We have to ensure the entire city is served. And that includes the homeless, but also the people who've chosen a community to raise their families and to work, to live and retire, because we have exactly zero assurances that the community won't be impacted. And the nonprofit has apparently no incentive to house their clients in permanent housing, to keep them housed, ensure that what the impact on the neighborhood is, and that the needs of the unhoused won't actually be met. And because of those things, I don't support this plan right now.
So Councilmember, first, let me thank you for your support
Mr.
for.
Drinkwater, I'm not gonna cut you off, but I'm gonna ask you to make it brief because we have.
No, I'll make it brief. I want to make sure we hear from the community, but I think it's also important to correct the record because the community came to hear facts about this project, and I want to make sure that they walk away from this conversation with a clear understanding of what's being proposed here. In the conversation yesterday, I did not say at any point in time that there would not be social service staff overnight and only left with security staff. That is a misrepresentation of what I said, and I'd like our provider to speak about their staffing and the social security and residential aides that will be on site at the shelter. I think that's very important, and it speaks to what you're talking about. The idea that folks coming in after curfew will be served, that is an agency policy. Again, it is not that only security staff are left on site in the overnight. So I think it would be helpful to hear from our provider to really talk through what the 24-hour period of staffing looks like, so we can connect individuals to services throughout that period of time.
I'm really happy to hear that, because yesterday, or when we met, what you said was, well, people sleep. When I asked about that, it's the same question.
I said it was a different staffing model, Councilmember. Please don't misrepresent what I said. I did say that people sleep. You're absolutely right.
I what you said yesterday. You told one thing yesterday, and you're telling the community something else now. And so
I said it was a different.
Excuse me.
Straightforward. I need the city to be straightforward with us.
I'd like our provider to respond, because they'll be able to speak about the different levels of staffing that do occur while, yes, people are sleeping.
Yeah, I'm gonna have the provider go after in a minute, but now we're gonna turn it open to the public. Now, again, I do want to advise 1 minute, one person per question. So here goes. First person, I see Andy. I see your hand is up.
Omar, it will take me a second to unmute that person, so just be patient, please.
Right.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, and it's fact-based, the Bronx, the borough of the Bronx is 42 square miles, has 9 shelters as of 2019, maybe there's more. Queens is 109 square miles, it has 3. So my question is, how is this place, this location picked? It's 1 mile from a subway. There's not even a subway within a mile. For these residents who are going to take a bus to a train to find work. How about we're also about an hour by public transportation to a city hospital, which is North Central Bronx. How was this location picked? Of all the places and all the boroughs, we have, the Bronx always gets shit on. We have enough shelters. Why isn't anyone picking any places in Queens? Let's spread it around. Can anyone answer?
I'm happy to respond. I didn't catch all of the numbers you shared, but let me just report out numbers from August 31st. The Bronx had a total of 114 shelters as of August. Of those 114 shelters, 12 will be closing under our plan. The borough of Brooklyn has 112 shelters. Manhattan has 84, Queens has 69, and Staten Island has 1. So that's just the distribution as of August. As we get more up-to-date information, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. In regards to transportation, the provider does offer transportation for clients. In regards to if there is an emergency, we would be able to call 911 to have emergency transport should a client require it.
Okay. Next person, Lena. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I know that you said you have a perimeter check and that's great. But out of all the places in the Bronx, if you must put it in the Bronx, why are you deciding to put it across the street from a bus station in a heavily wooded area? How can you guarantee that women, elderly men, teenagers, anybody in the community will not get off the bus and get dragged into those woods? It happens all the time, not just in the Bronx. Not to mention, we also have in the North Bronx a assisted living center. We have a woman's battered center that Moonlight says, well, I can't tell you what Moonlight says, but I know it does because our church goes there and counsels and prays for those women. How can you guarantee, I know you said this perimeter check, does your perimeter check account 24 hours and count the woods that are right there? Because that's not going to help anybody if it doesn't. So how are you going to guarantee my safety and my neighbor's safety and children's safety?
Sure. So I think, Matthew, if you want to talk a little bit about the security plan that you have at other shelters and the plan for this one.
I want to know what's going to happen with this shelter. This is the shelter in right now.
Absolutely.
Oh, did you hear what I said and what Eric said?
Yeah, hello? Oh, sorry. Am I not?
No, unmute yourself, please.
Commissioner.
Right. Ms. Drinkwater, I think you can respond to Lena now.
Sorry, I was saying if Matthew was available. So in regards to the location, when the shelter is built, the provider does a security assessment, again, both internal and external, to determine where there are places necessary to patrol if there are issues. So again, the conversations with the community are particularly helpful. You know, our clients are needing to take the bus. They will likely be using that bus stop. But in terms of the concern, you know, that would be something that the security would be attentive to.
I see Edward Amolo. Yes, you're now on mute.
Hi, how are you? I have two quick questions. The first one is for the person. All right, so the person Drinkwater is I don't want to be disrespectful, but you're not being clear as to why you're choosing a neighborhood like this where we have a lot of children and we have a lot of women traveling up and down Broadway at all different hours of the night. And now we're going to put 190 homeless men in a neighborhood where just this morning, I chased two guys off my garbage on my private property going through my cans. So we are inundated with homeless people in this neighborhood as it is. And now there's no clarification as to why you're going to choose our neighborhood once again between the W and the other various homeless shelters that Mayor de Blasio has used for this permanent site. So I would like some clarification as to how you came to that decision to choose North Riverdale.
Sure. So part of our process starts with the open-ended RFP. So nonprofit providers submit responses to the open-ended RFP. That stands for Requests for Proposal. Within that RFP, the provider outlines the type of program that they intend to have at the particular location. They need to demonstrate what's called site control, that they have control over the site to be able to build or operate a shelter at that location. When the provider submits the RFP, the agency then has to rate and review that RFP based on a number of criteria. We're looking at the quality of the proposal, the types of services that will be provided by the provider, the security, their track record if they have existing shelters. And we're also looking at things as it relates to our capacity and the need for the department to meet our capacity needs based on what we know of our census. So for example, we know that in the colder months, our single adult census increases because individuals who, as the council member said, might not be willing to come into shelter. We know that in the winter months, they do choose to come into shelter rather than bear the frigid temperatures. During the summertime, we see an increase in our families with children census. Parents will wait till the end of the school year to enter into shelter so as to minimize some of the trauma for young people who are entering into shelter. So we look at trends over time. We also look at what the footprint of the agency is in that particular community district, what that is in the neighborhood and in the surrounding area. Every time the department proposes a shelter and moves forward with it, we are obligated under the New York City Charter to submit what's called a fair share, where we take into account any existing facilities that are considered like facilities in the area. As has been mentioned, there's one other DHS shelter for families with children in this community board, and a fair share will be complete and submitted to this community board prior to the opening of the shelter. In addition to the fair share, we also do an environmental assessment study, ensuring that the location is not impacted. Thank you.
Next person is Susie Alcavedo. 1 second.
Hello?
Hello. Susie?
Yes, I'm
No, hold
calling.
on 1 sec. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna call on the names.
It's Acevedo, not. That's why I didn't understand what you were saying.
Acevedo.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so
For
much.
those, excuse me, sorry, Omar, for those who raise their hand and Omar is calling on you, I'm requesting that you unmute yourself. So look for something on your screen that says unmute and you'll be able to do so.
Did you unmute?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So you're gonna be asking a question, or is it Susie?
Well, I just like to say that all the deals that were made by this administration in regards to the homeless, the mentally ill, the incarcerated, so on and so forth, needless to see the lack of success that they've had. Needless to see what's happened in other homeless shelters for men and women and even children, as indicated by their actions. Everybody sees it in the news. Everybody in this neighborhood is family, works hard, and obeys the law. But there's already problems in existing homelessness in this area. To add to that is a death sentence for the community in a way where you don't need to speculate when you already know what's coming. And to take care of it after the fact, it's just exactly that, after the fact. And it's a little too late when you have to bury someone that has no life insurance, and so on and so forth. So I disagree with the rush of this administration on making deals under and above the table, because that's what politicians do, but not all politicians. We're fortunate enough to have the Dinowitz represent us, in the fashion and form in which they do. And I stand with them on disagreeing with the foundation of this homeless shelter in our neighborhood, but it doesn't mean we don't serve the homeless. It's just the way it's going about, the way they're going about it, not involving us, not hearing us. It's like we don't matter, and we do, because we help them and they help themselves, and together we help humanity. And that's what this administration lacks. And basically, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Stephen Exler?
Can I speak?
No, hold on 1 second. 1 sec. Stephen Exler? Yes,
Thank you so much. I'm a rabbi here in Riverdale of an Orthodox congregation with about 500 families. I'm speaking for myself. Very much want to echo the sentiment that we want to do what we can in our neighborhood to support those who are experiencing homelessness, and we want to find a project that will be effective and successful. And we want to support it if we can, and I would like to support it. And I wanted to ask the question, what kinds of things are possible in terms of interfacing and relationships between houses of worship and religious communities and the homeless shelters and their residents? For this provider, what have you done in terms of creating opportunities for the community to connect with the residents?
Can you hear me? Am I muted?
Who's this?
Am I muted or unmuted?
You're unmuted, but
Okay.
I think the service provider is the one that needs to respond to this.
Yes, I'm the service provider.
Okay.
So fortunately, for some reason, many of the shelters that we operate are either a block or two from churches. And we have developed linkages specifically with those houses of worship and the programs that we serve. So in our domestic violence shelters, for example, many of the women, the mothers, they attend service. In our supportive housing, it's built right about 2 blocks from a church. We have linkage agreements. We have the pastor or the ministers coming into the building. They discuss privately with the tenants of the building. We have several of our tenants who actually participate in services in the churches. We have group meetings with the houses of worship. So that's the kind of way that we have tried to bring in houses of worship to interface with the services that we provide.
Let's see. Betsy Friedman?
Yeah,
you're unmuted.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
First of all, I think you might have skipped over Susie Acevedo. She's next to me on camera. So you called on her, but she wasn't able to answer. So I want to mention that. But very quickly, what I want to say is not so much a question, but I would like to just give my point of view on something here because I believe it's unique. I'm a 50-year-old, as you can see, Caucasian woman. I am of Jewish. So I grew up with a very supportive community. And I was a single mother when I became homeless when my daughter was 6 months old. And I didn't know about the resources because it happened to me very quickly, literally overnight. So I just want to say that my experience in shelters, one in particular, I'm referring to, not here in the Bronx, but elsewhere in the city where I was living at the time, really helped me. And I'm back on my feet. And I want to also say that prior to that happening to me, I worked on Hollywood movies behind the scenes. I made a lot of money and I saved a lot of money, and it all disappeared because of one person's poor decision in my marriage. It disappeared, and it can happen to anyone. In the middle of winter on February 11th, 2011, that happened to me. So I just want to put an image to what homelessness could look like for somebody. It's not just a dude dragging people into the woods, because I can tell you, Jeffrey Epstein did horrible things to horrible young people, and he was far from homeless. And I never committed a crime. I never took drugs, still haven't. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I worked about 101 hours a week. I'm a union member. My union actually was very good at helping me as well to get back on my feet. And I'm back on my feet. It took me about 6 months, but it was very, very hard, especially with a baby. And I also sat on the PS 81 Parent Association. I contributed, once I moved to the Bronx, I contributed to my community. So I'm just urging you, instead of making your judgments about what homelessness looks like, here I am. And this is a very hard thing to admit to. My daughter in the next room who could probably hear me, she has no idea. So this is a really hard thing for me to say, and it's really hard for me to hear the comments. And it's really hard for me as a working mother who's single, who works extremely hard. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a worker. I'm a great mom. My daughter goes to public school here. I voted for some of you, and I was out there. So, just saying, maybe use some compassion before you judge. That's all. And that's all. So I want to thank you for all of this. I'm glad you gave us the opportunity to speak.
Susie, are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to
I'm
unmute.
hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I've been in the neighborhood for many years. I am a homeowner here, and I have a lot at stake if things do not go well with this plan. And I am going to assume that it's already been approved. It seems like North Riverdale has been the dumping grounds. We have on Broadway, we have the nursing homes of on 254th, where they have, it looks like they're the nursing home, but there are also homeless people there. There's constantly fights over there. I'm hearing it. The police always goes there. I'm just worried. Okay, I am very worried because right now it all seems to be going up to Broadway and North Riverdale. And I don't want to say, let's dump on somebody else, because I don't want to sound like I am careless, I'm not empathetic to the needs of the homeless. I am. But it seems like we are being sandwiched here. As it is, this Broadway, the pipe system, the infrastructure in here is so old, and when there is rains and their sewage comes up, my basement gets flooded. To put up another building that's going to add to our sewage problems right now is only going to, for me, I'm thinking it's going to be even worse. Not only that, we're thinking about how the Bronx is filled with park space, and schooling it's not just around the place where the kids can actually walk to the schools. How can you guarantee the safety of the children coming and going into schools trips? How can you guarantee that if the people, the homeless who do not make curfew, and they do not want to go to the transfer place, and they want to just stay there, that they won't be putting up tents and making the neighborhood another Skid Row, in the sense that we're going to have tents being put up?
Okay. I'm gonna ask you guys if you guys could limit your responses, because we have over 413 people in this room, and you have over 50 hands up, and I do want to get to as much people as possible.
I'll talk a little bit about the infrastructure, because I think I've answered some questions about security. And so while those concerns keep coming up, my answer remains the same. And again, the community advisory board that we'll establish are opportunities to continue the dialogue and to be able to be responsive. In regard to the building and concerns around infrastructure, the design for the building is an energy efficient one with a green design. So we'll certainly take into consideration some of the concerns that were raised just a moment ago. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'm gonna call on Eda Resnick. All you have to do is unmute yourself. Yes.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I'm from 6645 Broadway, which is right next door to the proposed site and where my 80-year-old mother still resides and has for over 45 years. I'm concerned that Deputy Commissioner Drinkwater mentioned keeping people in their homes and taking care of the most vulnerable New Yorkers. Well, I think the elderly and people who live in rent-stabilized apartments are part of that vulnerable population. So I have many questions around security. Having cameras outside does not make me feel better. I don't need to see my mother get mugged on camera. I want police presence there. But really the question I need to know right now is, where is the funding coming from? The city or state? What percentage city, what percentage state? Who's paying for this?
Sure. So in terms of just top line, the city contributes the vast majority of the funding for shelter. The state actually has an adult shelter cap. So we are capped in terms of the reimbursement that's provided by the state. And then there are federal dollars associated with it as well. This is for the total breakdown of shelters. It's different based on the family census. There is temporary aid for needy families that's available on the family side, but in regards to the single side, the adult shelter cap at the state is something that the city exceeds every year. We try to get additional reimbursement from the state, but have thus far not been successful. So it's a combination of city tax levy and state dollars.
Okay, but for this site, what part, like, is it half city, half state, or you don't know yet? Like, where is the money? I want to know like where I need to go to stop this.
Sure. So I don't have the exact breakdown for the contract at this site. What I just provided was top line, but that same breakdown would hold true for the sites.
And what's that breakdown?
So the adult shelter cap, I don't have the number in front of me. It is capped at, I want to say a couple $1 million, but I'd have to get back to you. It's something that I'm certainly happy to follow up with the board on. And then the remainder is city tax levy.
And the city taxes will also have to pay for additional police presence around that area.
So we have shelters all across the city. I mean, part of the security, again, to address inside the external patrols, you know, I can't speak to how the NYPD adjusts their patrolling. We do have emergencies that EMS or police would be called to the shelter location, but I can't speak to how the NYPD makes any adjustments in regards to the presence of a shelter. I'd also just note, similar to what one of the speakers was previously saying, we're sort of casting a broad negative characterization of our client population when that's just not the case. So, you know, happy to get more information on the specifics and can connect you with the precinct. Us having a partnership and ensuring that the precinct is aware of our presence is helpful, both to ensure the safety of our clients. I don't know if this community is aware, but homeless individuals are much more likely to be the victims of crime than the perpetrators of crime. And so I want to also raise that fact, because our communication with the NYPD is just as much about our client safety as the residents of this community.
But what about the residents?
I'm sorry. No. Let me, because listen, 400 members are here and about 50 hands are up. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut you right there, and I'm gonna go to Megdalia Velez.
Hi, my name is Megdalia Velez. I actually work for the City of New York and have worked for the City of New York for almost 30 years. So I'm well aware of the homelessness issue and a lot of the funding issues, RFP. I know all that. I actually have been in ECHO for 20 years. Know the commissioner and the ECHO of DSS. So my question is with respect to crime and property values. I'd like to know how the crime stats in the neighborhoods that you're placing shelters, how are they affected, and what is the correlation to property values? I'm a single mom. I put my life savings into buying my apartments, and I come home at night late, I work late, I take the bus, walk up Broadway, and I'm super concerned about the safety. And I'd like some concrete stats about the effects of placing a shelter in a residential neighborhood, especially one with elderly people and children?
Sure, thank you for the question. The placement of shelters in residential neighborhoods is not unique to Riverdale. Our shelters.
But we are very saturated, as others have said. Very
Community-
saturated.
Community Board 8 currently has one Families with Children DHS shelter. In regard to the saturation, I raised earlier that the agency does comply with the city charter mandate of fair share. In respect to property values, we have not seen evidence of declines in property values as a result of shelters being placed. There was an outdated report issued a couple of years ago that certainly did not include the consideration of the high quality shelter sites that have been opened under the mayor's Turning the Tide plan. And forgive me, I forget the other question you asked about property values and then something else.
What was the other question for property values? All right, tell you what, I'm gonna move on. Rosemary Ginty.
Does it work? Yes?
Yes,
Good?
yes,
Omar,
yes.
okay, the first of all, I have to say, there are so many people who want to speak from this community. I'm keeping it to one question, but believe me, I have 1,000 questions about this site, 1,000. This really needs a thorough going over. But let me just ask one question. The last shelter we had in Riverdale, it was presented to us, the city has a program, you have a provider, you explain that, a provider goes to an RFP, and in that case, it was Praxis, and then you have a developer, and the developer was Stag, and the developer and the provider get together and go to the city and say, do I have a deal for you? I got the property, I'm gonna build it, and I'm the operator. I have a question, who's the developer? What is the real estate interest in this property?
So the real estate interest, the provider here, African American Planning Commission, will be the owner of this property. They will own the shelter.
Okay.
And I think if Matthew wants to speak about the developer that they're working with and then ultimately become the owner, you can certainly jump in.
Matthew, what is the name of your developer? Ira?
Not sure if he's able to unmute himself.
I gave him permission to unmute.
Okay.
Court Square Real Estate Partners. They're real estate partners, and they're well known for developing quality housing.
All right, thank you. Next question is Arlene. Arlene.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm curious, I might have missed this, but what permanent supportive service housing organizations do you work with to move the men into? This is probably for Matthew, as well as, is this an emergency shelter or is this a temporary shelter with a maximum amount, maximum amount of months that the residents can stay?
So there's no time limit.
And also, how many, there's no time limit. So they can stay, there's no time limit?
So the average length of stay is a little over a year. I think what you might be referring to is there is a state set limit as it pertains to individuals who are survivors of domestic violence. Individuals in domestic violence, emergency domestic violence shelter are permitted to stay 180 days. You're on mute.
Kimberly Ali.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Alley. I'm a committee member for Health and Hospitals, and I'm hearing everyone's concerns. And, you know, I feel like we're not judging, we're just voicing out our concerns to the community that we live in, and this is for the organization, Mr. Matthew. I believe he could only answer this question since he will be running the facility, his staff. My question is, how will these men be productive in the community that they're going to reside in? Because I've already established a fact that this is not a plan. This is just a presentation. You know, this is already set in stone, unfortunately. So my question is to you, you know, having the experience, how will these men become productive during their stay here? That's my question.
Ms. Drinkwater, you want to answer that or not?
Oh, sorry, I heard that you wanted to hear from the provider, which I'm happy to let Matthew answer that question.
So one of the couple of things that we're doing is as follows. We are developing linkage agreements with employment agencies. We are hiring employment counselors. Not everyone who is residing in our shelters is just hanging around. Quite a few of our residents are actually working. Yes, it may be low income jobs, but they're still working, trying to better themselves. So when you say what are they going to be doing or how are they going to be engaged, our employment counselors will assist them in finding employment, and those who are currently working, make sure that they maintain their employment status. We intend to have a computer lab on the premises. We intend to have vocational programs. We intend to have linkage agreements with employment agencies so that those who are ready for employment can be linked to employment agencies and assist them in finding jobs. And there are many organizations that actually work with low-income individuals. The City of New York has a program that just skipped my mind right now, where specifically they work with low-income individuals for job placement. We have job-ready programs, for example. Those are the type of programs that we'll be having on site to assist those who are ready to work.
All right, thank you. I see Annie's iPod. Your hand is up. Yes, you're on mute now. Yes, you're on mute.
Hi, my question to you, I think earlier you stated you were closing 3 homeless shelters. Why not save taxpayer money and use those shelters instead of building a new one in this neighborhood?
That's a great question. So I think the easiest way to answer that is thinking about shelter in the analogy of an emergency room. On any given night, individuals show up at our door, and we talked about the legal requirement to shelter them. So it's not an either or proposition, it's a both and. We need to make sure that there's appropriate shelter capacity for the individuals who have the temporary experience of being homeless, and ensuring that there's an appropriate stock of affordable housing and supportive housing for those individuals who require it.
Next up is Ms. Sandra Avey. 1 second.
Hello, thank you for taking my request to speak this evening. I have a very, very large concern. This is 3 blocks from my house where this facility will be established. I lived through the Van Cortlandt Motel homeless male shelter. My house was attemptedly broken into twice. A third time, a disabled or disoriented gentleman ripped the windshield wiper off my car in my driveway. And there were incidences on Marshall Avenue where women were assaulted, elderly people were mugged, and other various awful things did take place. And I understand from what you just said that you're going to have security in the establishment you want to put up on 262nd and Broadway. Well, if this is such a grand facility, why do you need security? Is it to protect them or to protect us? And I'm going to tell you right now, in the Van Cortlandt situation that took place over 10 blocks, I'd say, from my house, the NYPD were overly inundated with all the crime that took place. And now you want to put 100, and it was a male shelter. Now you want to put 130 males, single, with backgrounds I don't know, in a neighborhood where there is a nursery school and a primary school. There's so many schools in this area, and you're putting this in our neighborhood. There are so many children that can be affected by this, and we don't know who these men are. But you keep giving me statistics and numbers and blah, blah, blah. And quite frankly, Ms. Drinkwater, I think you're full of malarkey. You're just giving me numbers. You're not.
Well, I'm Irish, so I know what malarkey means, but let me respond to your 2 points. First, getting out of the hotel was important. In my opening statement, I talked about the fact that hotels are not ideal in terms of providing social services to clients who are experiencing homelessness. It's why this administration made the commitment to end the use of commercial hotels to provide shelter by 2023. And we're working every day to make good on that commitment. We've started by removing families with children from commercial hotels and making sure that they're placed in tier 2 facilities with cooking kitchens, making sure that families aren't crammed into a small hotel room. We're then transitioning to our single adult capacity in commercial hotels. The other point I wanted to make is that you're talking about schools and the children, individuals who are experiencing homelessness and individuals who will be placed at shelter, who you might not know, but who the agency knows through the intake and assessment process, our fathers, our brothers, our sons, our best friends, and they're coming into shelter to get support and to transition back to permanent housing.
Next up, Senator Biaggi's office. Are they here tonight?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good night.
Oh, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, the senator could not join us this evening, but I'm here today on her behalf and eager to hear from the community on this proposal. I'm here to listen to the community and bring notes from today's discussion back to the senator and our office. And if you have any specific questions for the senator, you can let us know. I'll be sure to bring them to her. At this time, the senator does not have a position on this proposal, but once she reviews it and my notes from today's meeting, our office will be sure to make her position public and well-known. So my email is at constituentservices@senatorbiaggi.com, or you can call our office at 718-822-2049.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Bowman, Congressman Bowman's office. Is anyone here from Congressman Bowman?
Yes, hi. My name is Jesse. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
My name is Jesse Allaire. I'm an aide to Congressman Bowman. The Congressman believes our nation can do much better when it comes to helping the most vulnerable members of our society. The problem of homelessness has only been exacerbated as a result of the pandemic, as well as the expiration of unemployment benefits, but also due to policy failures across the legislative spectrum. One of our greatest priorities as an office is to develop and pass policies which advance care and compassion, while also breaking down the systemic barriers to economic and housing stability that many in our district face. Congressman Bowman understands how our crisis of affordable housing has been made worse in recent years and has been advocating for a quick distribution of emergency rental assistance funds to those facing eviction. He's also fighting to pass an $80 billion investment in public housing through the Build Back Better Act. Shelters can provide a vital lifeline to those experiencing homelessness, allowing residents to access social services and provide the security and stability that people need to help them escape poverty. Congressman Bowman also understands that, as with any proposal of this type, the community will have questions and concerns, and those concerns deserve to be heard and addressed. We invite constituents to reach out to our offices and voice their opinions on the proposed shelter. And you can do that by going to Bowman, BOWMAN.house.gov. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next up, I'm gonna call on Dan Padernack. Hold on one second. You'll be on mute in a second.
Hey,
You're
Omar,
on
can you hear
mute.
me?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, for those, I'm also a member of Bronx Community Board 8. Like I said before, I have a ton of questions. And what we haven't heard a lot about tonight is the actual building, the size, the envelope, the room size, a lot of the details that we like to get into, particularly in another committee. But I guess the question for this evening that I have, and I think what probably a lot of people are wondering right now, Deputy Commissioner, where is HRA in the process of the development of this project? And where are there any approvals or financing commitments that HRA needs or DHS needs in order to move forward with this project from city agencies, state agencies, city council, or state legislature? I know it's a lot there, but I think, it's where are you in the process? What needs to be done? What financing commitments, what approvals does DHS need in order for this project to move forward? Especially if I understood correctly, what you stated before was that the purchase of this property by the nonprofit has not occurred yet.
That's right. So in regards to where we are in the development of the project, this is new construction. Construction has not begun yet. It will be ground up development in terms of the parameters of the building. We're in preliminary design phases. Part of our commitment in notifying communities at the earliest moment possible means that sometimes we don't have finalized plans with us. From those preliminary drawings, the building will be about 5 stories tall, 4 of which will be sleeping quarters. The ground floor will have a lobby and programming and windows on Broadway to support activation of that streetscape. I'm guessing you might serve on the ULURP or Housing Committee of the board. Talked a little bit about the dorm size. I had stated an average in the conversation with the assembly member and the council member. Upon further conversation with my team following our discussion yesterday, it was told to me that the dorms would sleep 4 to 6 individuals.
And how many square feet is that? How many square feet?
I don't have the square foot requirements with me. Under the Callahan litigation, there are requirements as to what the dorm must look like and the layout must be in terms of beds and lockers required for clients. In addition to the approval processes that the agency must go through prior to opening, State Office of Temporary Disability Assistance must inspect and sign off on the opening of the location. Department of Buildings, FDNY. So there's a litany of approvals that do need to occur. Shelters do not go through the ULURP process. So that's an important point to note.
So I guess just answering that, so it's going to be an as of right, whatever
That's
they're building is
correct.
going to be as of right. And I guess the other thing, which if you can just clarify for me, the funding, obviously the purchase hasn't occurred yet. So are there still funding approvals needed or required to move forward with this project?
I'd have to get back to you on where the contract with the developer is.
Well,
Or
there's
excuse me, the
funding-
contract with the provider.
When you say the contract with the provider, do you mean the DHS contract with the provider?
That's right. That's
Okay.
correct.
I guess I was asking a little bit different, though. The contract is interesting also because that's got a, that has its own approval process, the lease and the contract. But what I was
That's
asking
right.
was whatever agencies are committing to financing. Has
So
that been done?
our contract is with the provider. That contract includes the per diem rate in regard to rent and the associated social services.
So is HRA or DHS not providing any financing for the purchase or construction?
The contract doesn't cover that, no.
It does not. Okay, and are any agencies providing funding for the purchase or construction?
Not to my knowledge.
That's right, only the contract of services on the annual basis.
That's correct.
Is the contract provided to be a 20-year with 5-year increments, or is it a different time frame?
Matthew, do you remember the contract terms? I want to say I don't remember off the top of my head. Matthew, do you have that available? Trying to see if I see him. I can get back to the board on that question. That's not a problem.
All right, then we're gonna
Interest of time.
move on to the next question, and we'll be reaching out to you, Ms. Drinkwater, for that answer. to
Yes,
that.
absolutely. And we can follow up on any questions that the board has after the meeting, and we'll continue answering right now.
I see Ayla Fabian. Ayla, are you there? Okay, we're gonna move on. Lot, you there? You're back. Hi. Let me unmute. You're
Hi.
unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Okay, first and foremost, I just want to say that I am a mother in the community. We are living less than 1,000 feet from the proposed site. I have 3 little children, and I'm very, very concerned about the prospect of having sex offenders potentially living in the site. There's no, I'm not hearing about, I did hear about proximity limitations to any schools potentially, but you know, we have residences with little kids all over that area. So I'm very, very concerned about the safety of my children. And also, I just want to echo Councilman Dinowitz's question about what motivations does the provider have to segue the men in the facility to permanent housing if they are getting paid per person per day?
So we have obligations under the State Office of Temporary Disability Assistance in regards to client responsibilities of the acceptance of service of shelter. Clients are required to engage in an independent living plan, to abide by shelter and house rules, to engage in good neighbor policies, and ultimately work to transition out of shelter. The work of the provider is to do that. And there is, performance tracking that we have with the provider in terms of ensuring that the contract in which they hold to provide services is met. But what we also know is that things like move-outs, for example, are not entirely within the control of this particular provider, or for that matter, any of our providers. We've talked a little bit tonight about the affordable housing crisis across the city. We talk about, difficulty in terms of establishing and maintaining employment. All of these things can contribute to the length of stay, none of which this provider has any particular control over. But what we do is, the provider is expected to perform the services in terms of social services delivery, yes, moving clients out, and we work with those providers to review those metrics.
Now our board chair, Ms. Laura Spalter, would like to say a couple of words. Here, can you unmute Laura? Laura?
Okay, now I can. I've been muted. All right, thank you. This evening has been very important tonight in terms of getting information and allowing the public to speak. And I just have a few comments. I've been listening. It's unfortunate that this has been designated a general population shelter. You said earlier you operated a shelter, I believe in Brooklyn, where it's called an employment shelter, where everyone is employed. I have concerns here because the law allows mentally ill, chemically addicted. so that you have nothing to say. According to the law, it requires that you not have, in our view, adequate screening. The law requires that you have to admit sexual offenders. Sexual offenders, we're right across from Van Cortlandt Park. We have little leagues. We have tons of children in the neighborhood. And the community has no say because the law requires that you accept sexual offenders. The law requires that you can't ask about criminal records. No wonder, the community is absolutely terrified because we know the reputation of shelters. We know because if you read the papers, violence that occurs in shelters, and 130, the density, that's a lot. There are other shelters that you operate that have 80, 40. I don't know how you got to 130, but that is really not housing, but more warehousing because of just the whole setup. So that is what I want to say. We're very concerned. We're going to continue at the board, listening to the community, working with everyone on every level. And we are looking forward to the financial information that Mr. Padanak requested. And thank you for this opportunity. I will continue to listen. Great concerns.
Thank you, Chair, for your comments. Let me just clarify in regards to how the agency goes about placing clients. We spend the initial days and weeks learning about clients before they are placed in a program shelter. In regards to this not being an employment shelter, that's not the current need. The employment shelters serve employed and employable individuals. A general population shelter can serve somebody who is employed. It's not to say that those individuals wouldn't be served at this location. As it pertains to individuals with criminal legal system involvement, again, that is one metric that we look at in terms of shelter placement and what type of location is going to be best suited to serve the needs of that client and so that they are successful in their transition back to permanent housing. We as an agency must follow the law and not discriminate against individuals who are requiring shelter. But that does not mean that we are haphazardly placing individuals in locations that won't meet their needs and cause potential harm to communities. Individuals with severe and persistent mental health or substance use diagnosis would not be located at a general population shelters. We have shelters specifically designed with different staffing models to serve those individuals with severe mental health diagnosis and persistent substance use disorders. This is not the type of population that would be served at this location. So I think it's important to clarify, because when we're responding to the unknown, it's natural to be fearful. But what I'm trying to share with the community tonight is all of the places in which we know information about the client population that we're serving and the individuals that would be located at this particular site. Again, a site that's not slated to open for 2 years. And we have plenty of time to build relationships, to help increase understanding of the work that DHS does, the work that the provider does, and a little bit more about our client population.
Okay, thank you so much for explaining that. So I am going to take, say, 3 more questions, and then after that, we are going to go into committee discussion to talk a little bit about this project. Now, I do want everyone to understand that, as our chair said, Ms. Falter, that we take everyone's opinion into consideration, especially residents. And this topic will not just die here. It will be on next month's agenda, and the Land Use Committee will also be discussing this. So you are all welcome to come to those both of those meetings next month, and we're going to try to get as much of your opinions into consideration. So I'm gonna take 3 more questions, and then after that, we're gonna go into committee discussion. So the first question will go to Sean Murray. I see your hand is up. You're on mute.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just very, very quickly, just a little background. I'm a small landlord in the Bronx. I own a few buildings in the South Bronx, and I've housed my fair share of homeless people in those buildings. But let me tell you, one bad apple will ruin a whole building where you'll have maybe 20 other units in there, people that have been there for years, maybe decades. There's one tenant in there that's bad, the whole building wants to leave because, thanks to how difficult they've made it to evict people, it's really, really difficult to evict people. And to hear that, they're obviously concerned about safety issues here with the security guards they have, the cameras they have, 42 cameras and all that. So there's definitely safety issues here. And to be housing 130 people in one building with really no checks on them, no screening, no nothing, you're going to destroy this neighborhood. So I've seen this, I'm not waiting around for this neighborhood to crumble. This sounds like it's a done deal. I'm moving, I'm getting out of here, and I'm not going to wait to see the whole neighborhood crumble around me, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Winston Bryce. Yes.
Fuck
Hi.
your project. Hello? Fuck your project. Can you hear that?
Yes, Mr. Bryce. I'm hearing you. Kira, are we?
Hi, Omar, you can call on the next person.
Okay. Jalissa Fee here. You're unmuted. Jalissa? You're right.
I'm giving her permission to unmute. I don't know. We can come back to her, Omar.
All right. Marie R.
Okay, you can unmute yourself, Mary.
Oh, I thought I was muted already. Hi. I think Winston was trying to say something before me, so maybe if you could give him a chance and then I can go.
Hi there, I was able to unmute myself. My apologies. Can I still speak, Julissa?
Yes. Yes, you can speak now, and then after you, the next person that I picked on. Yes, go ahead.
So thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Julissa, and I live in Riverdale, and I also own the only dual language preschool on Moshulu Avenue. So as you can imagine, when I found out about this project, I was very, I got very upset at first, and now I'm very concerned. And some of the things that scared me were things like security officers are going to be needed in the shelter. Police officers are going to be called. There are cameras all over the place. So this is not helping me feel safe. Or having my children who are really, really tiny, 2-year-olds to 8-year-olds sometimes in the summer. And I don't have a question, obviously, because my main thing is to express how I feel and tell everyone in the community how upset we are. And I understand that, we want to help the people. I mean, I'm one of those that want to help our people. However, bringing a shelter without our, without asking all of us in the community to come to a consensus is totally wrong. And so I just wanted to say that, because some of the questions that I mean, I didn't have questions really. And even if I ask the questions, I'm not getting, we're not getting like a precise number when it comes to how many of these men, you know, in the shelter have criminal records, how many of these men are, you know, sex offenders, and how many of these men are mentally ill who do not take their medication. So all of these things worry me. And how many of these men, you know, suffer from substance abuse?
Thank you for the questions. A couple of points that I'd just like to respond to. Every year since 2017, the Department of Homeless Services has sent a letter to the Community Board and to all of the elected officials representing Community Board 8, requesting input on sites for shelter selection. Unfortunately, we've not received responses to any of those letters over the years. We've talked about our legal and moral obligation to provide shelter. We're doing that with this project. In regards to the client population that we're serving, there's about 1,500 people on parole in our shelter system at any given time. We publish a report on our website that speaks about the mental health prevalence in the shelter system. This is self-reported data. You're more than welcome to look on the reports section of the Department of Homeless Services website to learn about the medical and mental health needs of our clients. So I hope that's helpful to give you a little bit more context.
All right, thank you. Marie R., are you back? Kira, do you see Marie R.?
Okay. I already mentioned it before. Winston didn't get a chance to go, but I hopefully he gets a chance. I'm just gonna say what I need to say, and then hopefully he gets to go. Also, there's also research shows that compared to homeless families, homeless single adults have much higher rates of serious mental illnesses, addiction disorders, and other severe health problems, as a lot of you mentioned before too. And recently there was a case where a grandmother had to watch her granddaughter get snatched by a homeless person in the Bronx, daylight. And now that grandmother is seeking medical care to deal with the trauma. So I'm not a mother, I'm an aunt, and this is very concerning. Making a shelter in that location is very concerning, as all of you have already stated. So yeah, pretty much.
Thank you for that. I'm an aunt as well. I live quite close to a shelter in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I live close to an assessment shelter. Those are the shelters that I talked about that clients only stay for a couple of weeks while we're getting to know them and assign them to a program shelter. The shelter that I live close to is what's called a SARA compliant shelter. Individuals housed at this shelter can be registered sex offenders and are registered sex offenders with residency restrictions. So my sort of personal experience to homelessness, I understand what it's like to live close by to a shelter. I make it a point to pass by it frequently. And, you know, that's me. Everybody is different. You know, for folks who want to get involved, we have community advisory boards to be supportive and to create the necessary communication pathways so that way we can be a good neighbor. I talked a little bit about the statistics in regards to the concern about individuals with mental health. Part of our response and part of having shelter is that way those individuals can be connected to care. Making sure that folks are working with social service providers, working with case managers, working with social workers, working with psychologists is important. But the way that they're going to do that is by getting connected to shelter first and coming inside to seek and receive assistance.
Okay, thank you. On The final question, I'm gonna have it go to our new committee member, who's also a new member of Community Board 8. Sebastian, are you there? Sebastian?
Sebastian, you should be able to unmute yourself. You're unmuted.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, my concern is about with this whole project. I understand the issue of homelessness and the shelter trying to resolve the issue partially. However, where do we get to this number, 120 plus individuals served in one facility? And is there any evidence or any studies to prove that such a large facility is in any way successful, and is that kind of model providing any kind of success and solution to the big problem that we have in the city?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead. In regards to the shelter size, the single adult shelters are able to be as large as 200 beds. We recognize that certain physical structures and certain communities would be better suited with smaller number of shelter beds. And so in this instance, we didn't go as large as 200, but rather the 130 that is part of the proposal being discussed today.
All right, thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for coming to this meeting tonight. As I said at the beginning, we got this notice a couple of days ago, and we didn't anticipate that it would have such an effect on the community. Ms. Drinkwater, do you commit that if possible, could you come to our next meeting?
I'll have to check what the date is. I don't want to make a commitment that I can't keep, but this is the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation.
Right. And the land use committee will also be reaching out to you as well as and also the service provider to bring you to their meeting to see if you could speak a little bit, because this issue touches on two committees, which is the L committee and land use committee, which is chaired by Mr. Charles Mergler. So they will be reaching out to you as well. I do want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I do value everyone's opinion, and I hope the Department of Social Services will take all the residents into consideration, their feelings, their concerns, and everything. And we at the board, we will be examining everything, and as you know, weeks and days goes by, we will see what is going to happen. We will engage more with the elected officials and most of all with the residents. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming. Members of the public are free to stay or they can sign off, but for now, I want to bring the committee to speak a little bit about this issue. So committee member, Steve Gross, are you here? Karen, I know you're here. Sebastian? Yeah. So, committee members, based on the discussion tonight, what is your opinion on this new proposed site at 661 Broadway? Somebody is on mute.
Can you repeat the question, Omar, again?
What is the feeling of the committee on this? There seems to be a great amount of opposition proposal. This is Sebastian, right? Sebastian?
Omar, that was Sebastian. I'm working on unmuting your committee members. Karen should be
Alright.
unmuted. Steve Fruit,
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
All right. I recognize the need for this homeless shelter. I recognize also the needs for the concerns of the neighbors. I think, I don't know if the security is going to address the issue. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
All right, but it's more than security. I think screening needs to be addressed before people are admitted to this shelter,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Steve, are you there?
Yes, I may have some microphone issues, but, I think that, I don't know the possibilities, for actually putting a halt to this kind of, this kind of establishment of a shelter. And I'm no expert in this. I know that we've ended up having a good experience in the community, I believe, with another shelter on Lower Broadway. But of course, that's a different population, a very different population. One of my hopes would be that if we can stay on top of this issue, since there is such a long timeline, that we can, build in considerations possibly of downsizing, of additional staffing, that kind of thing. And that, that assumes the project goes forward, but obviously it's a very long timeline.
All right. Rabbi Kaplan? Always there?
Omar, I don't think he's at the meeting any longer.
Right.
Right. Right. So, okay.
Onwards. Bill, I can't hear you. Bill?
Yes, so there needs to be more research about how we're going to tackle this issue, and of course, more engagement with the public, and of course, our elected officials, so that we can do more and see if we can come up with a solution. Laura, you still here?
No, probably not.
Laura. So listen, we're gonna discuss this more and speak about and see what solutions. And of course, we will be working with the Department of Social Services, and we will do what the most important thing is the voice of the community. And I want you to be rest assured that Community Board 8 is deeply, deeply committed to working for this community. So the next meeting, the next ELT meeting will be the second Wednesday of every month, and the Land Use Committee meeting will be coming up as well, which is going to be before the Health and Hospitals meeting. So I do want to encourage you to come and to hear what the Department of Homeland Services is saying and what our community and our elected officials are saying. So thank you so much again for coming tonight, and we will stay on top of this, and we will work greatly for our community. So thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Drinkwater.